अच्छा चले हेलो या जैनब अहमद या दिस
सलाम।
कंट्रोलिंग ठीक है अस्सलाम वालेकुम वो वी कैन स्टार्ट विद रिवीजन ठीक है ऑफ व्हाट वी डिड लास्ट टाइम राइट so hopefully everyone can see the screen right अहमद screen नजर आ रही है
यस सर।
अच्छा just a quick recap of what we were up to ठीक है we wanted to make formulas we wanted to make equations so what we मैं पूरा quick recap कर रहा हूँ कि what we did was after chemical bonding, we had discussed which groups have, when it comes to ionic compounds, group one has +1, +2, +3, group three is +3. Okay, when you move to non-metals, -3, -2, or -1, right? Transition metals had variable oxidation or charges. They could be +2, they could be +3 as well. And I told you that when it comes to transition metals, their charges would be written written with the formula. और इसके बाद वो मैं ऐड कर लेता हूँ. I had told you one more thing, which was that I told you I've told you one more thing, which is that although zinc is in the same block as a transition metal, but always remember zinc is always +2, and no one is going to mention what the charge of zinc is, although it's a transition metal element. And then we did the crisscross method of writing formulas, okay, which was a shortcut that if Mg, which is a metal, loses 2 electrons, fluorine is a non-metal which gains 1 electron, right? So Mg would be +2, fluorine would be -1. But since it's losing 2 electrons, this is gaining 1 electron. They got to be more fluorines, right? And the shortcut for that was that instead of thinking or going into detail, it was a simple method of crisscross, which will give you the formula, which will give you the ratio of the ions, right? Aluminium and oxygen. Aluminium in group 3 was +3. Oxygen in group 6 was -2. You did crisscross and you got Al2O3. So we practiced, I mean, we did a whole worksheet on this. Then sodium was +1, phosphorus was -3. You did crisscross, 3 go the layer, 1 over there, and you will get your formula, right? And then we did polyatomic ions. Polyatomic ions were basically, I told you, were molecules. You don't need to remember the dot and cross diagram. They were molecules that ended up gaining electrons because the outer shell electrons were not getting completed. So they ended up gaining electrons or losing electrons from some other element. Jisa yahan pe lithium had 1 electron and this OH ended up gaining an electron from lithium, which is why it got a -1 charge. It gained an extra electron. But you don't need to remember the Dorian cross diagram for a polyatomic ion. All you need to know is that there are ions which are very common in chemistry and which are very, very important. And their formulas and their names have to be memorized. Okay, I've sent you screenshots of this. Okay, I've sent you notes as well. So there's this entire list of polyatomic ions. Just you have hydroxide, sulfate, nitrates, phosphate, carbonates, ammonium, hydrogen carbonate, okay, chlorate 5, chlorate 1, hydrogen sulfate, sulfide, nitrite, phosphite. Okay, all of these ions are polyatomic ions. You have to know that these are one. This is one entity. You can't change the formula of a polyatomic ion on its own. It's one N bonded to four H's, and it's got an overall +1 charge. So you can't turn it into NH3. You can't turn it. I mean, obviously there are some reactions which will do that, but you can't change the formula of a polyatomic ion. Carbonate would always remain carbonate. So we did the same with polyatomic ions. I told you. Maybe calcium was in group 2, so it's +2. Hydroxide is OH -1. You have to remember what hydroxide is. You have to memorize that. And if you do crisscross, 1 over here, 2 over here, and you get calcium hydroxide. That's the formula of calcium hydroxide. And we did a number of examples with this. ठीक है, we did a whole worksheet. ये थोड़ा सा और कर लेते हैं just for revision. That's uh, let's say let's say sodium phosphate, right? So what is phosphate? It's phosphate is PO4 and it's got a -3 charge. And what is sodium? It's in group 1. So it has a +1 charge. You do crisscross, it's going to be Na would be 3, or PO4 would be 1, right? So you don't have to write 1. I mean, you don't have to write 1 in this case because it's pretty obvious that if you even don't write anything, there is one phosphate. I say called calcium. Let's do magnesium phosphide. Let's do phosphide. So Mg is in group 2, so it's got a +2 charge. Phosphide is what? It's PO3 and -3, right? If you do crisscross, it's going to be Mg3 and PO3 would be twice. Okay? Just make sure that don't change the formula of the polyatomic ion. You can only, I mean, there obviously is a -3 charge on this. The only thing is you don't write charges when you make the formula. I mean, this has a +2 charge. This obviously has a -3 charge. It remains there, but it's when you write the formula, you don't actually mention the charges. Okay. Acha, so I told you this thing over here was extremely important, and you have to memorize all of this. Acha, next, which we did was that we talked about acids and bases. We talked about usse pehle, before we talked about acids and bases. I told you that there's a chemical which is very important, and that is water. Water is everywhere on the planet. TK, I mean, it's in your body. 70% of all living organisms, that's water, plants, trees, etc. They all have water in them. And the Earth's crust has water. 70% of it has water in it. And the remaining percentage, that also has water in it. TK, you dig the earth and you find water inside it, right? So water is everywhere, and I told you. Okay, why was water important? Because water provides particles. It's very hard for particles to meet each other. So water kind of provides the medium in which these particles can float around, and they can move around, and they can collide, and they can do reactions. They can lose electrons, they can gain electrons. But for that to happen, the particles, they need to sort of meet each other, and that would be impossible if they're not floating in water. So आपका जो blood है, that I told you was a medium that carried all the particles, took things away from the cell, provided things to the cell. So without water, the transportation will not be able to take place, and the particles would never be able to meet each other. So for chemistry to happen, water is extremely important. So, and then I also told you that water is not just water, because some of the water molecules, they break down and they produce two ions. One is H+1 and the other one is OH-1. Okay, so water very slightly. कि अगर आपके पास, if you have thousands of water molecules, then a few of them during collisions might break away or break down and produce H+1 and OH ions. That's called ionization of water, right? Or dissociation of water. So water tends to ionize. So when you see water, it's not always just H2O. There's going to be some H+1 ions and some OH ions over there as well, because some of the water molecules are breaking down. Or Smita, I told you that a neutral, I mean, the thing that's called neutral, or the thing that's called pH 7, that is what? It's a type of water, basically. pH 7 hota hai, your blood is almost pH 7. Like if I Google your what is the pH of our blood, okay? 7 से थोड़ा ज़्यादा, actually. It's slightly greater than 7. Achha, man, I'm going to recap this chapter a lot of times because this chapter, I mean, in chemistry, this is the only chapter that's difficult. Achha, the pH of blood, it's not exactly 7, but slightly higher than, very slightly higher than 7. Okay, so what 7 means, or when it's exactly 7, what does that mean? It means that the water that you have has exactly the same amount of H+1 and OH ions. So every time water breaks down, it produces H+1 and it produces OH ions, right? So, and that is produced in equal amount. ठीक है, मतलब अगर if you have one water molecule, it will break down and it will produce one OH ion and it will produce one H plus one ion, right? It's going to produce it in equal amount. So technically, any water that is pure, that doesn't have anything in it, that can be considered neutral water, right? And that is pH 7. So pH के ऊपर भी ना, I'm going to come back to that later on as well. At the moment, just understand that that pH is a calculation. pH 7, what does that mean? It means that the H plus 1 and the OH ions are in equal amount. Okay. And then we talked about acids. Okay, we did all the acids. What were acids? Acids, technically, the only definition for acid is that it's a proton donor. It's a particle that produces H plus 1 ions. So if you add a particle that releases H plus 1 ions in water, right? So what will happen if I add a particle that starts producing H plus 1 ion? What's going to happen is that the quantity of H plus ions would go up. You'll have a lot more H plus ions compared to OH ions. So an acid is a particle that produces H plus ions, and your H plus ions, they start going up. So it's a proton donor. A proton donor. It could be a molecule, it could be a compound, it could be an ion that produces H plus ion. So technically, if anyone is going to ask you what an acid is, it's a proton donor. That's it. Okay, that is what an acid is. So there are a number of particles that behave as acids. For example, if you mix HCl in water, what happens is it breaks down and it produces H plus ions and Cl ions. So it starts producing H plus ions. If you add this ion to water, what happens? It breaks down, ionizes, and it ends up producing H plus ions and another carbonate ion, which we are not really interested in. But what will happen is your water may the H plus ion amount will increase. Okay. And then we did formulas of acids. So I told you that since acids are molecules or particles that produce H plus ions, so they obviously have H plus ions. Okay. So every acid has this formula that it is an H plus ion attached to some negative ion. A positive ion would be attached to a negative ion. And we did all these formulas. So there was another list of formulas which you had to remember. So technically, an acid is something that contains H plus ion. It's not going to be alone. It's a positive ion is always next to a negative ion. So you can attach any negative ion to H plus 1 and that will form an acid, right? It's just crisscross. H plus 1 with sulfate, that will make H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid. H plus 1 with NO3 minus 1, that will make nitric acid. Okay, if you do crisscross, H plus 1 with PO3 minus 3, if you do crisscross, it's going to be H3PO3, and that's phosphorus acid. Okay. Just remember, this is all recap of previous class. So you had to. So this was another list that you had to remember. You had to remember these names, and you had to remember the formula. You can't obviously go on and start making them because you don't have enough time. So it's better to remember all these formulas of acids. ठीक है? तो यहाँ पे मैं show कर रहा हूँ. If I add HCl to it, the HCl will start producing H plus ions and it will start producing Cl ions. So in your solution, you can see that the amount of H plus ions is going up compared to the amount of OH ions. ठीक है? So all acids, or when I told you that I told you a few things, which was that all acids, when you put them in aqueous state, they dissociate. I mean, they break down back into the ions. H2SO4 tha, so it will break down back into H plus and SO4 minus 2 ions. And I also told you something very important, which is that when particles are together, so you use small 2, small 4, etc. Or remember, sulfate is one entity. Polyatomic ion, sulfate is one entity, so you never break it into pieces, right? You're never going to do that. ये अगर टूटेगा ना, ionize करेगा, it's going to break over here. It's going to produce H plus 1 and it's going to produce SO4 minus 2 ions, right? So these two ions will be produced. Phosphoric acid is going to break down. It's going to produce 3 H plus ions and it's going to produce 1 phosphate ion. Or when they are separate, you write the big 3. ठीक है? When they are joined together, तो मैंने ये difference बताया था. Okay, both of these things, they mean two Cls. But when they're together, when they are bonded together, you write the small two. When they are not bonded together, but they are separate, you write the big two. So anyways, we did properties of acids और सारी properties वगैरह हमने की थी sour taste और turns litmus paper corrosive etc. ठीक है, all of those properties. We did some examples of what your common everyday acids are. ठीक है, we did that. और basis पे ना हम आए थे. We were going to start with basis. अच्छा, one very important thing that we pH का लिखा था acids when we are doing acids. I told you that is ठीक है, this is important. The pH goes down. It's less than 7. ठीक है. Oh, at the end of the day, I'm gonna make a scale. I said now what Ibad, the Veera, Ghania, Pista Sara clear here. Is this clear? The all the previous stuff.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I said so. The reason is because this is a difficult chapter, so I'm going to recap everything slightly. I said moving to bases. I told you bases were the exact opposite of acids. Okay, what were bases doing? I explained to you. Bases are proton acceptors. They're the exact opposite. This is the definition of what a base is. Okay, it's a proton acceptor. So if you have water, तो base क्या करेगा? Base इसको read कर देते हैं. So if you have water, like lots of water molecules, so the water molecule has H plus one and OH ions, right? कितने हैं? 3. अच्छा, so it's got 3 H plus ions and it's got 3 OH ions, right? Water ionizes. At the moment, it's an equal amount. If I add a base to it, let's say this particle is a base, so I explained to you, okay, the base will start removing these H plus ions. But it will, उनके साथ कुछ ना कुछ करेगा. What it will do is that it will probably bind with them. So the solution is going to have a lot fewer H plus ions. So the H plus ions are going to go down, and then relatively the quantity of OH ions are going to go up. Okay, this is what a basic solution is. Or alkenes मैंने कहा था, they're basically bases which are soluble bases. So basic solutions are formed when bases are added to it. And what do the bases do? They remove the H plus ions that are in the solution. And this happens. ठीक है, bases का pH क्या होता है? The pH is, it's greater than 7. There's no upper limit, but normally it's greater than 7. It's between 7 and 14. But remember, 14 is not the upper limit. It could be higher than 14 as well. So you clear a basis, the basic idea of what a base is. What does it do? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
So now the formula of bases. पहले. So what is a base? अभी मैंने कहा, what does it do? It removes. It's a proton acceptor, right? That is what a base is. So proton I told you was H plus ions. So it's a proton acceptor. So it removes H plus ions. Now the only thing that can accept a proton is probably, what is the charge of a proton? It's positive, right? So it's got a positive charge. So who's going to attract this H plus ion? A negative ion. So normally what bases are negative ions. For example, the oxide ion is a base because if it sees H plus ions around, what will happen to it? It will immediately accept it. It will immediately attract it. And the two are going to combine together and they will, H or O मिलके क्या बनाते हैं? They will form H2. I'm just going to balance it. So an oxide ion is by default a base. Wherever you see an oxide ion, the solution is probably going to be basic because solution may say all the H plus ions are going to get attracted to the O and they'll end up forming water. So the solution is not going to have a lot of H plus 1 ions. Okay, is this clear? This is the first base. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Saro clear? Rania, Zainab here, is this clear? Is baat clear hai?
Sir,
As a second one, hydroxide is a base. Because if hydroxide sees the H plus 1 as well, it's a negative ion, it will also attract the H plus ion and it will also combine with it and it will also form water as well. But the OH and H will combine and they'll form water as well. So again, the H plus 1 in the solution is going to get used up and you're going to have fewer H plus ions in the solution. So oxide is a base, hydroxide is a base. Next one. A carbonate ion is also a base. Carbonate, yaad hai, CO3 minus 2, that's also a base because it's also a negative ion. If it sees an H plus ion, what it does is, what a carbonate does is that one of the oxygens of a carbonate, right, it combines with this H plus ion, not the whole carbonate ion. That one oxygen combines with the H and it ends up forming H2O. Okay? So one of the oxygens from the carbonate combines and it ends up forming H2O. I mean, you need two H plus ions. So two of the H plus ions that are in the solution will go and combine with one of the oxygens and form H2O. So carbonate mein one of the oxygen gets used up. What is left? CO2 is left. For the CO3, then now one of the oxygen is gone because that oxygen ends up combining the H plus ion and ends up forming water. Okay? So carbonate is a base as well. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
और इसको ना मैं लिख देता हूँ. It's weakly basic. I mean, that just means that it wants to do that, but it's not very strongly attracting the carbonate. Okay, the other two are like really strong bases. तो ये थोड़ा बहुत ही काम करता है. अच्छा, then the fourth base. The fourth base is ammonia. अच्छा, that's also weakly basic. And we're going to discuss strong acids and strong bases later on. Ammonia has a tendency to accept an H plus ion as well, attract an H plus ion, and it also combines with it. So when NH3 combines with an H plus 1, it ends up forming. ये कौन सा ion था? The name of the ion was called ammonium. It ends up forming ammonium ions, right? So these are all your bases. You've got oxides. You've got hydroxides. You've got carbonates, which are weakly basic. And you've got ammonia, which is also basic. Okay, so these compounds, oxides, hydroxides, carbonates, and ammonia, these are all basic because they like to attract H plus 1 ions. ठीक है? ये clear यहाँ तक? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
बाकी here is this clear? Ibad and
yes, sir.
Nabila is अच्छा. Listen, now the next thing is just adding to it. Remember, negative ion is never going to exist alone, right? There's got to be some positive ion attached to it, right? So it's not just going to be an oxide. It has to have. I mean, there's going to be some positive thing attached to it. You see that the OH minus one. It's not just going to be OH minus one. It's probably going to have some positive ion attached to it. As similarly, carbonate ke saath, it's a negative ion. So there's probably going to be some positive ion attached to it. You can remember a negative ion is always attached to some positive ion. Okay. So, or positive ion, who makes positive ions? Metals make positive ions. It's normally it's metal oxides, metal hydroxides, metal carbonates, and ammonia. Okay. Or there's one other thing that forms a positive ion, and that is ammonium as well. But remember, it's actual to base, and it's this thing. The other thing is that's a spectator ion. It's not really doing anything. Okay. The carbonate is the one that's going to be acting as the base. The metal isn't really doing anything. It's just lying around. Okay, फालतू की चीज़ है, ammonia. Okay, the only thing, I mean, the only reason you have to add metal to it is in negative ion is obviously going to be attached to something, even though that something is useless. It's got no role. Like it's just going to be there. So metal oxides, and over here I'm just going to add. There's one other positive ion as well, which is ammonium. So because that's also positive. So ammonium hydroxide, ammonium carbonate, right? That's so metal की जगह ना you could have NH4 plus one as well. अच्छा, so we're done with bases. अच्छा, what we can do is we can write properties of bases. So what are the properties of bases? Like if something makes things, but the base का काम क्या था? What it does is it reduces the amount of H plus ions and it increases the amount of OH ions. ठीक है? So the properties of bases. So number one, it turns क्या करता है? Litmus paper would turn from red to blue. ठीक है? That's number one. अच्छा, और they do actually, most of your soaps are actually bases. So soaps, etc., they are slippery to touch. अच्छा, और क्या indicators? Well, these are also corrosive. बल्कि वो भी लिख लेते हैं, they produce salts with acids. They can also be corrosive at higher concentrations. So they can be corrosive at higher concentrations. And बस कुछ ज़्यादा household products वगैरह में क्लीनिंग वगैरह में बेसिस बहुत यूज होती है. ठीक है, तो मैं ऐड कर लेता हूँ many household cleaners. They have ammonia. अच्छा, और क्या होता है? They have ammonia and फिर soaps तो वैसे ही basic होते हैं. ठीक है, तो which we add कर लेते हैं. That's also used in many household cleaners. Carbonates वगैरह, ये baking soda etc. That is also used for cleaning. तो वो उसमें होता है. अच्छा, anyways, basis के बारे में ज़्यादा important चीज़ तो इसके अलावा नहीं है. That's pretty much it. Uh, what is more important is the reactions. काम की चीज़ है, वैसे basis के बारे में और नहीं. अच्छा, but is this part clear up till this point to everyone? Ahmed? Ibad, yeah. Zainab is clear.
जी
सर
सर।
Libya.
जैसे रिएक्टिव होता है ना,
क्या बोला?
सर एसिड्स जो होते हैं वो बेसिस से ज्यादा रिएक्टिव होंगे।
उसमें मैं आता हूँ असल में रिएक्टिव मतलब दिस इज व्हाट इज मेंट बाय रिएक्टिव ना कि मतलब सिंपल टर्म्स में क्या करना है, मतलब इधर समरी में लिख देता हूँ। समरी इज ये एसिड है, ठीक है, दिस इज एन एसिड। उसने क्या करना है, व्हाट डज इट वांट टू डू? इट वांट्स टू प्रोड्यूस H+ions। कहीं भी उसे रख दो ना, पानी में छोड़ दो, it starts releasing H+ions, right? अच्छा, what is a base do? वो उसने कम कर देने H+ions, like if you put it anywhere it's just going to grab all those H+ions. For example, if this is oxide, so it will start forming water with all these H+ions, ठीक है? So that's अच्छा, so reactive in what sense? Reactive का मतलब है कि if the acid produces a lot of H+ions, right, very very quickly, so that means it's very reactive. If it doesn't do that, yani, it produces H+ions, but it does it very very slowly. So matlab it's very less reactive, right? The same with bases. A reactive base is one which, matlab, many people say whenever it finds H+ion, it starts attracting and combining with it, right? And starts removing it from the solution. So it's a very reactive base. If it doesn't do that very quickly, then it's a very unreactive base. So, अच्छा, इसमें ना, what the way you refer to it is strong acids. So what's a strong acid? And they're going to say strong base. But reactive नहीं कहते, they use the word strong. ठीक है? So a strong acid, what does it do? It fully ionizes. But जितने भी H plus ions है ना, it will release those. It fully ionizes and produces yeah, and donates more protons, which are basically your H plus ions. So that's what a strong acid is. What's a strong base? Again, fully ionizes. यानी जितने भी मतलब if it wants to gain as many H plus ions, it's going to do that and accepts uh, fewer protons. ठीक है, which are H plus ions. ठीक है, so that's a strong acid. That's a strong acid, strong base. ये clear है सारों को? Is this clear?
यस सर।
और ये हर पेपर में this is something that they're going to ask you always. They're going to similarly talk about what a weak acid is. So normally acid का पूछते हैं, they don't. I mean, you can apply the opposite to a base. So what's a weak acid? What's a weak base? A weak acid is that it partially or weakly ionizes. ठीक है? Zainab, exactly this is what they're going to do. Like, and you can just say fully ionizes. That basically covers it. ठीक है? But that is exactly what this statement means. नहीं depend अच्छा ठीक है नहीं Dabira मेरे ख्याल से I think chat GPT is it depends on the concentration of the acid. If it's a dilute acid, you can obviously watch it. जो जिन acids की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ ना, the one that cause the burning thing, that they produce a lot of heat because they ionize when they mix with water. ठीक है? Acids की ना I'm just going to tell you कि normally if you've been to the lab, ठीक है, that those acids have a lot of water already added to it. So the acid that I'm talking about is the one that is in the purest form, which has no water added to it, and it's the most concentrated form of the acid. Okay, this is the type of acid that normally uh, नहीं HCl चलो मैं concentration की बात है ठीक है it's about I'm going to discuss but after the class I'm going to send some stuff to it to you ठीक है it's not about बस दो चीजें which I'm probably going to discuss right now as well because since it comes up ठीक है I'm just going to discuss that as well तो अच्छा okay before that weak acid ठीक है बल्कि नबीरा आपका क्वेश्चन मैं पहले डिस्कस कर लूं कि there's a strength of acid and then there is the concentration of the acid, right? So the acid that I'm talking about is the which doesn't have water. I mean, there's no water added to it, and you're adding water for the first time to it. So वो वाला जो acid होगा ना, that's going to produce a lot of heat when it mixes with with water for the first time. ठीक है? जैसा lemons है ना, lemons के अंदर क्या होता है? There's already water inside it, right? So lemon के अंदर जो भी acid होगा, which is citric acid, which you drink, ठीक है? उसके अंदर it has already ionized. तो मैं बात कर रहा हूँ ये चीज होने से पहले ठीक है मोस्ट एसिड्स दैट यू सी अराउंड यू ठीक है फॉर एग्जांपल सिट्रिक एसिड दैट यू जो लेमन्स वगैरह लेमनेड वगैरह ठीक है यू ड्रिंक आई मीन देयर रिएक्शन हैज ऑलरेडी हैपेंड दे हैव ऑलरेडी मतलब वो जब बना था ना द H+1 ऑलरेडी लेफ्ट एंड was roaming around ठीक है because there was already water everywhere and it mixed with water and it started ionizing so most of the time that when you see acids those acids have already ionized ठीक है तो मैं थोड़ा उससे पहले की बात कर रहा हूँ कि बिफोर दिस हैपेंस बट एनीवेज वो मैं उसकी ना अलग से I'll share videos with you ठीक है वो इसके साथ मिक्स ना हो जाए so I don't want to do that right now ठीक है वो मैं शेयर करता हूँ क्लास के एंड पे अच्छा कमिंग बैक टू वीक एसिड्स ठीक है वीक एसिड्स क्या है दे partially ionize so they don't like to produce H+ ions and they therefore donate fewer protons or you can say H+1 ions and weak bases that's exactly the same but they're also going to partially ionize and donate not donate except fewer protons so they're not interested in accepting the protons ठीक है weak base which are basically H+ ions so remember so this question is very important ठीक है it's going to appear almost in every exam now you got strong acid you got strong bases you got weak acid you got weak bases right examples of strong acids, strong bases, I'm just going to do because organic chemistry is the last chapter. So examples में strong acids. What are strong acids? Normally what happens is that all mineral acids are relatively strong. These are the ones that we just studied. These are the ones given above. So they like to ionize, they like to produce H+ ions. I said, so that's what strong acids are. जो ऊपर जितने भी थे ना phosphoric acid, nitric acid, etc., the ones given above, they're all mostly strong acids. उनमें से ना there's one actually that's not strong, and I'm going to come to that. Weak acids, most organic acids. So this is something that we're not going to study right now. ठीक है, organic acids. वो last chapter we're going to do when that comes up. Most organic, when you do past paper questions, just avoid past paper questions that have organic acids in them because uske liye you need to study organic chemistry, which is the last chapter. So we're going to avoid it right now. So most organic acids are weak. So what are organic acids? They are the ones that contain carbon in them. कि एक example का citric acid है. Example citric acid. I showed you the diagram of citric acid. Even carbonic acid, which is H2CO3, that has carbon in it, and these are all relatively weak acids. ठीक है? And the same with bases. What are strong bases? So strong bases when it comes to strong bases, as a strong basis के अंदर you've got oxides and hydroxides. ये बल्कि हमने लिख भी दिया था ऊपर. We already did this. ठीक है, so I'm not going to copy that again. We wrote down strong bases, strong acids, strong bases यहाँ पे. Okay, I told you that carbonates are normally weakly basic, and ammonia is also weakly basic. I'm going to write it under this that these two are normally strong. Hydroxides also normally tend to be strong bases. ठीक है? The other two are weakly basic. So ठीक है, we're gonna stop here और इसको further जितना हो सके revise करो. I've added my assistant over here as well. She's going to give you work over the weekend. ठीक है? वो please complete करना. That's going to be related to acids, bases and salts. ठीक है? और Nabila, I'm just going to share videos with you. ठीक है? Related to what we were discussing. ठीक है? So continue करते next time. Okay, everyone.
अल्लाह हाफिज़ सर.
Allah Hafiz.